gave you a beautiful bouquet and me a bottle of Glenfiddich.
Ooh, very nice, very
We can
nice.
come again.
Right, okay. Can everybody hear me? We've had problems with the microphones this evening. Oh, right, but you can, everyone can hear me clearly. Thank you. No? We've got a slight problem. Say that the microphones aren't very loud. Is there anything I can do with the microphones? Okay, thanks. Microphones and I are going to get very friendly. Right, okay. Can everybody hear me now? Okay, good evening, councillors. Thank you. Before we start the meeting, I'm going to ask Gary Woodall to do the webcast introduction, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to remind everyone present that this hybrid meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing or other such use by third parties. Therefore, by participating in this meeting, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. If any public speakers on Zoom do not wish to have their image captured, they should ensure that their video setting throughout the meeting is turned off and set to audio only. Please also be aware that if technical difficulties interrupt the meeting that cannot be overcome, the Chairman may need to adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, members, and welcome back to the Council Chamber. Certainly for me, it's been a long time. So it's, if we can start on tonight's agenda. Before we do so, for the webcasting and any members of the public watching, I'll just do a few introductions. My name is Councillor Sue Jones, and I am chairing tonight's meeting. To my left is Andrew Marks, Service Director for Planning. And then to my right, firstly, I've got Councillor Brian Rolfe, my Vice Chair. And then to the far right is Gary Woodall and his colleagues from Democratic Services. I will be a voting chairman tonight. I don't think there is any advice for public and speakers. They are appearing at tonight's meeting through Zoom, and they have been given the advice about time limits prior to tonight's meeting. So our third item on the agenda is apologies for absence. Over to Gary.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies tonight from Councillors Baldwin and John Whitehouse.
Thank you. And any substitute members attending?
Thank you, Chairman. We have Councillor Caroline Pond attending as a substitute in place of Councillor Baldwin.
Thank you. Welcome, Caroline. Thank you. And item 5, members, are there any declarations of interest on any item on tonight's agenda, please? Councillor Heap.
Thank you. I was phoned by the applicant of this item, and she asked me to go and see the site, so I did.
Thank you. Any other declarations? Thank you. In that case, we go to item 6. We have got the minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of March. Those minutes are attached to your agenda. Have we got any comments or questions about those minutes, members? In that case, are you happy that I sign those later as a true reflection of that meeting? Thank you, members. Item 7, as always, is for noting. It's the Epping Forest District Local Plan Submission Version Planning Policy Briefing Note that tells us about the weight we should assign to the local plan submission version that is out for main modifications consultation. Item 8 is our item on tonight's agenda, and this is planning application EPF 0524/20 at High House Farm, Stapleford Road, Stapleford Abbots. And I will turn straight to Andrew, who's going to introduce it for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, I think you kindly promoted me earlier. I'm the Development Management Service Manager, not the Director. It wouldn't bother me too much, but Mr. Richardson might not be too happy about that.
I apologise.
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Like you said, this is an application at High House Farm, Stapleford Road in Stapleford Abbots. And the application is for the construction of 20 new dwellings with associated infrastructure. The application includes affordable housing provision of 5 units. What you see over there is the larger application site. I will in a moment show you the smaller site. So there's actually two distinct areas where the housing will be provided. This is where the current farmhouse is located, and what you can see back there is an empty swimming pool that you will see on one of the photographs. This is the access road here through to the piece of land where the main development is going to take place. As you can see from the red line here, this demarcates the whole site, and the area around here is proposed to be some green field for use of the public. Members asked at the planning committee where this first served that we get some drone footage, so I'll show that to you as well. This is the road goes to Stapleford Abbots with the large roundabout where you go to Abridge further up to the north. That's the existing farmhouse with the swimming pool over there. You will see from closer photographs that there's quite a lot of hard standing and very thick pieces of concrete across the site. This over here is a pile of rubble that's about 4.5 meters high, and you'll see some photographs of that as well. So this is the current development before members. We've got a mix of 3 and 4 bedroom houses, and we've got a few affordable houses in this area here, and then a few over here as well. There was a previous planning application that was refused when most of the affordable housing was located in this area here. You will see that there's a central sort of grassed area where, and I'll speak about that in a bit. There was a 2007 outline planning permission with houses on this area and a central garage area over here. This application takes that out, and I've got a map coming, or a plan coming up, that shows you the difference between the extant planning, outline planning permission and this application. This is what I was just talking about. There is.
Andrew, I just like you to pause slightly. I think we have a problem. Sorry.
Okay. Okay. I'll lead in closer. Is that better? Okay. Okay. So this is what I was talking about earlier. We've got an extant planning permission dating back to 2007 that granted planning permission for 7 houses on the site. These are the red buildings over here. They were fairly large and substantial dwellings, up to 5 bedrooms. It also included permission for a hall to be used by the parish council. The yellow buildings here are the buildings of the current application, and like I said, they're a mix of 3 and 4 bedroom houses. That is the garage block for the old permission. That permission is live and can be implemented, and I'll get onto the detail of that in a moment, but that is obviously a consideration for members. This is a typical elevation of the houses. So there's a few semi-detached ones, and there's 2 main types. They've got garages, and then the larger houses with a double garage integral to the building. So what you have here is the green area is part of the larger site, which the applicant is offering to make available for public use. The red line shows the application site. These are some of the aerial photographs taken by our supplier. You will see that's the big pile of rubble that I was referring to earlier. These are the areas of hard standing. There's some old concrete structures here that you'll see in a moment as well. So the site has also been surveyed, and there is some arsenic, asbestos, and other harmful materials on the site, which will have to be cleaned up. That's a ground level photograph showing some of the rubble on the site. That one's a bit out of focus, but it shows the same pile of rubble. This is just to show you the large bits of hard standing, and over there you can see some of it fairly thick slabs of concrete. We are told that the site consists of made ground between 6.5 and 3 meters deep, so yeah, quite a lot of rehabilitation work to be done. That's one of the concrete structures that I referred to earlier. And that's the empty swimming pool behind the house. So that's the end of the slides. I'll just get on to the more detail bits now, and I'll stop sharing the screen. Here we go. Okay, so as explained, this application is for the construction of 20 new dwellings, 5 of them affordable. This application actually went to the Planning East Subcommittee on the 3rd of March 2021 with a recommendation to refuse planning permission on grounds of the impact on the openness of the greenbelt, sustainability issues arising from the location of the development because it's outside of the main sort of settlement of Stapleford Abbots, and then 2 further issues which we believe can be overcome, which was the absence of a legal agreement to deal with Section 106 matters and impact on air quality. Obviously at that meeting, members did take into consideration that there was a previous refusal of planning permission in 2019, which was for a development that was more dense. That was also refused on greenbelt considerations. When members had a look at this application, though, they clearly did a balancing exercise, and it was felt that it, for various reasons, it should be referred to this committee with a recommendation to approve. Officers have worked with the applicants in the meantime, and it seems we have agreed broad Section 106 grounds and also air quality mitigation, although the air quality mitigation exercise has not been done, which is understandable because there's a fee to be paid, and an applicant may not want to do that until he's got a resolution to grant permission. Right. So the main issues that we need to look at this evening is obviously the impact on the greenbelt. Like I said, and I showed you the drawing that shows the red and the yellow, which is the difference between the planning application that can be implemented and the current application. So members will have to decide whether there's an additional impact on the openness of the greenbelt. The applicant has also offered 20% affordable housing, which is below what we require in terms of our local plan. However, as explained, the site has got some very extraordinary works that needs to be done in order to clean it up, and members will have to debate on whether that's in the public interest to have that. There's also provision of electric bikes for residents that's offered. There's contributions for the mitigation of the air quality of £352 per dwelling for recreational impact, and £335 for the air quality, and then also provision of high-speed broadband. So just going on to the consultation. Consultation was done by site notice, letters, and a press notice. The parish council advised that they have had extensive consultation with the developers, and they've got no objections, and they fully support the application. And if I remember correctly, they did speak at the previous committee meeting in support of this application. We had one response from Stapleford Hall Farm, which was about traffic speeds, which the officer reports there is obviously a highways matter and not for the district council. So the main issue then is the site history with an extant planning permission that can be implemented. I should say, because that doesn't come out in the report, which I apologise for, the original permission does have a contribution for affordable housing, which was £100,000, I believe, although that is index linked, so there is a formula, I believe, with which that amount can be worked out to the current day. So The affordable housing I've already mentioned. The developer is offering 5 units, which is below our requirement, but is similar to the 25% that was agreed at the previous refusal through a viability statement, that is the maximum amount that can be offered, especially taking into consideration the extensive works that needs to be done to clean up the site. Lastly, just looking at the impact on the Epping Forest Special Area of Conservation, we obviously now have an interim air quality mitigation strategy, and the applicant has agreed to pay the financial contributions, although because the site is not allocated and wasn't part of the traffic modelling that was undertaken in 2018, further work needs to be done as confirmed in our air quality mitigation strategy, and therefore we do have in the recommendations or the decision required, requirement 3, that officers be authorised to add and or amend any planning conditions or section 106 planning obligations, but only in respect of securing necessary measures to mitigate air pollution impacts on the SAC. And I know we had some members asking about that. Sorry, then just one last issue to perhaps just discuss is the sustainability issue, and I think there's 2 main issues here. The first is obviously that the site is located across from the school and the village hall, but well outside the main boundaries of the main village. There is a bus route that goes past the site, but I had a look earlier today and it seems to me it only runs once every 90 minutes. The green area that will be accessible to the public, I know members might think that's a positive thing, and that could be the case, but I should also just point out that because of the location, it is quite probable that some of the people using that space will do so by, or will visit it by using vehicles and cars. So that's the end of the presentation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Members, before I proceed to the speakers, I apologise that the sound quality isn't perhaps what we're used to today for some reason. I think because of that, if there was anything that was unclear, please during our discussions make sure that you ask for clarification. I'm certain that because of the sound problems, I know Andrew won't mind just clarifying things for us. So I know people are always very reluctant to ask a question if they think it was covered in the presentation, but considering the sound quality, please don't be fearful of that. So if there is anything unclear, I'm sure Andrew won't mind clarifying. Okay, we will now move to our speakers. We have 2 speakers tonight. The first one is Councillor Jane Jackson from the Parish Council. Good evening, Councillor Jackson.
Good evening, Chairman, and good evening, committee members. I represent the Parish Council, Parish of Stapleford Abbots here this evening and ask for your full support and recommendation for this proposal from all members of the committee. Howard House Farmers had to have planning permission in 2007 for 7 large dwellings on this site. It was previously the old flat rendering farm. This is not a Greenbelt site, it's PDL site, contaminated, very unsightly and at risk within our village. It's also had a number of outbuildings on the site previously, which were asked by Epping Council to obviously flatten. So obviously, just clarifies that obviously it has been a working farm in previous life. The applicant is representing a scheme to replace existing permission upon the site, which we feel as a parish is a more viable and suitable development within Stapleford Abbots, making smaller homes available within our community to assist families who cannot afford the larger homes that are being given permission and are being built locally. Please see the notes provided in detail on this application as I ask the members to please consider these notes and fully understand this site. The applicant has gone to great lengths to address the points raised by the last committee in detail and ask for the support there this evening upon reviewing the notes attached in this application. The new application is within the same area of the existing build that has been granted. The application will result in more affordable, smaller housing needed within our village, a scheme that differs from the large mansion houses that currently have planning upon this site. The proposed scheme sympathetically blends into the surrounding area removing any unsightly problems, clears up the contamination risk and has existed for many years and preventing any chance of travellers conveying onto the openness of this site. The application is granted, if the application is granted, will give the community a heart in the centre of the village from the quality of the housing design within the added benefit of the parish and village hall, within the centres of Stapleford Abbots in a piece of land that has been a risk of misuse for many years. This will allow our community to come together on numerous projects and support families within our area, as it will directly be opposite and proposed application site, allowing the hall to raise funds, which obviously for parish rooms, allowing the hall to raise funds for community projects, as an example, by the way of baking days, craft events, wildlife study programmes, support for our local school, outdoor projects, programmes to support our elderly villagers and members, to organise group meetings from ages between 1 and 100, to name a few ideas. On the wider aspect of the remaining land, the area around the proposed site should approximately 30 acres is available to be used by the Stapleford Abbots community, which we have a big presence obviously on the pathways and everything else around the village anyway, so that will just feed back into the village more for the community. The last recommendation from the FDC was for a greater number of homes, 27 recommended for approval, with full support from the FDC. The same officer refused the application due to the last committee's refusal before dismissing my request for support this evening. So I just want to obviously say that we do feel very strongly about sort of, with this project, and hope that you will obviously have been able to do a site visit and obviously be able to support this for us.
Can you wind up now, please?
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Our second speaker tonight is the applicant's agent, Michael Corder.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Chairman. So I'm from Phase 2 Planning, speaking on behalf of Mrs. Founting and Stonebond Properties. As you've heard, the East Subcommittee determined that there were significant benefits that represent very special circumstances to grant planning permission, contrary to the officer recommendation. And we hope that this committee will support that decision this evening. This application proposes the redevelopment of a contaminated, derelict, previously developed site, which, whilst Greenbelt has every appearance of a derelict brownfield site that has a low value to the Greenbelt, the sites remain derelict without any public benefit because of the substantial costs associated with remediating the contaminated land. However, this proposal will finally achieve a positive balance sheet and decontaminate the land, alongside securing other significant public benefits. Your officers identify this case is finely balanced, and it's about the weight that members give to the site's specific circumstances. Officers previously recommended approval of 27 homes on this site, and this application seeks only 20 dwellings, which will reduce the impact on the Greenbelt and address the council's previous concerns by comparison. There are also significant material benefits in this application, consistent with the previous positive recommendation, that in our view should tip the balance in its favour. Your officers previously agreed that the historic site uses and the commercial planning permission for 7 mansion properties on this site should be given considerable weight, and this came together with other matters that are still present in this application to provide very special circumstances, and this should still apply. Your officers also previously explained that remediating this contaminated site is in the public interest, and that was considered sufficiently unique and exceptional to meet the test of very special circumstances. Again, this should apply. By comparison with the previous positive recommendation for 27 dwellings, this application will secure a greater financial contribution totalling £120,000 to meet the full cost of constructing a new parish room, when previously the contribution met only part of the cost. This has the full support of the parish. There's now the provision of 30 acres of publicly accessible green space, providing new amenities to the village, and that is accessible on the existing public rights-of-way network. Vehicle charging points will be provided for all plots. Electric bikes are also proposed for residents, and so is high-speed broadband. This proposal is also more aligned to meeting the needs of your residents struggling to find starter, family homes and affordable housing, compared with the extant planning permission for mansion dwellings. The subcommittee agreed. The extant permission provides no affordable homes, but this proposal provides 5 affordable homes, which is the maximum confirmed by your viability consultants, and it will be delivered by one of your local partners for families on your waiting list. This council has recently granted a number of applications for housing surrounding the site. It's close to the settlement boundary. Members noted that the site's close to the local school, the village hall, the local church, as well as being on a bus route, making this an accessible location. Your officer's report confirms that we will address any impacts on air quality. We therefore hope that members agree that there are significant benefits representing very special circumstances that tip the balance in favour of
Can you
granting
just wind up
planning.
fairly quickly now, please?
And we hope you grant planning permission this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Calder. Thank you. Before we open it up for discussion, I would just like to ask Andrew to clarify one thing. And again, I apologise if you did cover this in your report. I might have missed it. I know that the site has not been identified in the local plan and indeed was discounted at a fairly early stage of the local plan submission version. Andrew, could you just A, confirm that's right, and B, just explain why it was discounted, and possibly just, does that mean there's any implications if we did grant planning permission on this today, if there is any implications of that? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there's two issues to look at. The first is whether the site came forward as part of the latest local plan submission version, and my understanding is that it did not make the initial cut. The main reason being that it's outside the buffer zone. Even if it did come up as a site like this one, where the site is not allocated, then it would still not pass our sequential test, which requires, in terms of our strategic policies for housing development to take place within the buffer zone of villages. In terms of impact of the local plan, obviously we would prefer, and the ambitions for the plan is for allocated sites to go first, but the national planning policy framework does obviously allow for development in the green belt under very specific circumstances, and that's what members will have to take into consideration tonight.
Thank you. Right, members, Councillor Brady.
So I don't know if people can hear me. Let's hope that you can. And then if I can just go over again, because I don't know how many people here are confused as to exactly what the situation was with this site. It came before Plans East about, I don't know exactly, it'll say in the papers, say 3 years ago, with a recommendation for approval for the 27 houses, which is in my patch. Now, no site visits had been mentioned, and I thought 27 houses sounds rather a lot in a rural, supposedly greenbelt site. And I imagined a small concrete apron that the owners were trying to get away with 27 houses. And John Phillips also didn't like the look of these 7 affordables were separated completely and put along the main road away from the private houses. So between the two of us, we worked very hard on the committee and got it turned down, despite the planning officers having recommended it for approval. We then got offered site visits by the owner after the event, after we'd got it turned down, and I was horrified when I saw the site. It is, I think Ms. Paul Kesker described it earlier, like on our committee, as like a World War II bomb site. If you have been there, and I noticed that Paul Kesker, Brian Rolfe, Richard Morgan, Mr. Heap and myself at least have been there, I don't know who else, good, that it's really astonishingly large site of concrete and tarmac and everything, because it was a working site for many, many years. It was a huge fat rendering place. It had a weighbridge there. It had all sorts of strange businesses going on, transport businesses and so on, over many, many years, and caused a little bit of grief to the village, I think. You've now got this area standing there that is so contaminated and so not good for anything other than the types of people who like to move in onto hard standing. And yet it is surrounded by beautiful countryside. So it's a beautiful spot for houses. And strangely enough, as I say, it is, as the planning officer said, it's so much nearer to the school, nearer to the church, nearer to the village hall than the rest of the village. The village of Stapleford Abbots is a little way down the road, and the school is outside of the village, so's the church, so's the village hall, but they're all very, very close to this site, as is the bus stop, and there is a regular bus service through there still is, that goes through to Romford. So it isn't cut off, it is the most perfect site, and I just so regretted my action of having got it turned down before. So when it came up before Plans East again, and several of us had been on the site visit, it was we did persuade people, and it was passed quite strongly. As you've heard, the parish council is very, very solidly behind this. They support this scheme enormously. They're very keen for houses to be built here. So you have to overcome this thing that it wasn't on the local plan. It's a very strange situation here with Stapleford Abbots because of the decision to increase nuclear villages and towns and grow around that nucleus. So they've put in to develop greenfield sites in the village that all the villages are up in arms against. There's not a lot they can do about it, but they're very opposed to the greenfield sites being covered in the village, and they're fully supportive of this site just a little way up the road actually being used for houses. So it is an unusual setup, but what else would you do with this site? You can't fall back on the 8 houses that it had permission for before. It's been through all different developers have been offered it, all the builders. Nobody can make it pay for 8 houses. It's going to cost so much money to remove all this tarmac and concrete and everything else that they do need the 20 houses in order to make it pay. And it would, I feel, and the whole of the village feels, and the parish council feel, that it would be a very good use of this site. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Chairman. I wonder if Mr. Miles can tell us, there were 6 houses granted in 2006, and then in 2014, 8, and now 20 tonight. The first 6 and the second lot of 8, they were actually started, were they?
My understanding is that it was just the outline planning permission granted in 2007 for 7 houses was commenced. So they discharged all the necessary planning conditions. So that application or permission is live, and they can build that tomorrow if they wish. And that is the red houses that I showed to you on the comparative plan.
Microphone, sorry.
Sorry?
Can you just repeat that? You didn't have your microphone on.
And that's on top of the 20 we're talking about tonight, then?
No, instead of.
Is that including then?
Yeah, the planning permission that exists, my understanding is for 7 much larger houses, but for just 7 houses, and that has been granted, and they have started that, so that could be continued. So it's either that application, or if we granted tonight's application. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct. I mean, the footprint for the development outline for the site is broadly the same, but in technical terms, in terms of planning, you can't implement 2 planning permissions, so it's one or the other. So it's either 7 big houses or 20 smaller ones.
Thank you. Councillor Kesker.
Thank you, Chairman. First, I'd just like to bring to the committee's attention how much of an industrial wasteland this is. It was a great shame that we had restrictions on site visits when it came before Plans East, because a visit there was enough to convince me that this was an individual visit that I made was really worthwhile. This does look like well, the East End of London or Berlin or whatever, when it was bombed. There are huge piles of rubble, there was hard standing everywhere. This is an industrial site, and it's been used for a number of purposes which are today would not find favour, but it is an industrial site. Can I then say that I think the current plan is a big improvement on the previous plans, and I think covers a lot of the areas that we would wish to see. It also secures the green area about the houses, which will therefore never be built on and will be available for public use. It has been mentioned about the fact that this is residential buildings going onto the main road, but if you know the road, there are residential buildings all the way along that road, most of them quite large developments. And if you look at the plan, you will see that there are houses both to the south and to the north of this particular site. I would say when it came before Plans East and we considered all of this, the committee was very strongly in favour of granting permission. It was, I don't think it was unanimous, but it was almost unanimous. We looked at this, considered all of these options and the past of the site and the future, and we virtually all agreed that this was the best option. I will certainly be supporting this. I have mentioned a couple of points to the Chief Planning Officer with regard to a condition that's on here, number 3, which I did regard as a bit problematical in as far as we as a committee are passing an application with conditions, and yet some of the conditions are not actually written yet. But Mr. Marks has come back to me, and I thank him for that. He came back very quickly, and I accept the point that we are in difficult times with the special area of conservation and other matters, which means that some minor items here, of which electric vehicle charging and broadband are 2, but they will have to be worked out with the owners as the planners go ahead with this. So nevertheless, I am strongly in favour of approving this application.
Thank you. I think the applicant's agent in his presentation did actually mention that there would be electrical vehicle charging points and high-speed broadband as part of their plans, but that would be obviously up to officers to confirm. One thing I'd like to just very quickly input, just to make sure we are all knowledgeable on this, one thing that did come up at the Plans East meeting was the discussion about the bus service. We had one member saying that there were lots of bus stops along the route, and that was counteracted by another member saying it's not actually to do with the number of bus stops, it's actually to do with the service and the actual reliability of the bus service. So I think it is quite important. Councillor Brady is absolutely right, it is a regular bus service. However, it is a regular bus service every 90 minutes. So I think we just need to make sure that we are fully informed. We are talking about sustainability, we are talking about 20 dwellings, and that bus service possibly would not necessarily, in my opinion, but again, what we think is but that I think we do have to know that regular bus service is every 90 minutes. So, Councillor Brady, I will come back to you, but we've got other members who have indicated, who haven't yet spoken, so, but I will come back to you, I promise. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of my comments have already been answered by the previous questions. My only remaining question about this development, I have a general point afterwards, if I may, is who is going to maintain the public space? It's admirable that it cannot be developed in the future, but what is the maintenance plan for it? Maybe helping members, there may be some confusion regarding the starting of the 7 detached previous houses that were given permission. In planning law, a start of building can be digging a hole that's left there that just fills with water, basically. It's a trick that developers use to say they've started. There is nothing on that site that looks anything like the start of 7 buildings. I have a general question. I'm not sure if it's the right place. a newbie to this.
Try us and
It
tell
really comes down to valuations on sites generally, and this one perhaps not particularly, because I understand the costs of the remediation because of the contamination. But our sites demand 40, our policy is for 40% affordable housing. Each site has a value, and it has a value at its current use. It has its value later on with a change of use. The change of use should be based on 40% affordable housing. That would obviously be worth less than a site with no affordable housing. I understand all of that, and I understand that on this site the remediation costs may wipe out that part of that proportion. But basically on this site and any other site, it either works or it doesn't. And the value of the land should be based on affordable housing of 40%. And if it can't be achieved, or if they say they can't afford to achieve 40% affordable housing on that site, they paid too much for the site, is my opinion.
a very astute point.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. That's a general point that maybe officers would like to come back to separately.
Yes.
Thank you.
No, that's a very astute point. I don't know if there probably is no real comeback at the moment. But
All I can say is that I think it's fair to comment that these viability assessments, we obviously take advice from experts in the field. It's not something that planning officers do themselves. It has been referred to as a dark art. I think, to be fair, when you look at sites that have been allocated in the local plan, then the latest guidance published by the government does take that into consideration, that actually the fee that you, or the price that you pay for the land should assume that you already have to do the 40%. However, as with most other things in planning, there are sort of guidance that also makes provision for these extraordinary circumstances where, for instance, you have severely contaminated land, and those you can deduct from the affordable housing. And just so, sorry, the affordable housing issue and the viability was already agreed with the applicant on the previous application as well. So I think we've done our due diligence on that.
indeed, thank you. Councillor Chris Pond.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I wanted to pick up a couple of points, including the one you made. Bus route number 375, as you say, links Romford with Stapleford Abbots. It's a very useful route, but it is one of the least frequent run by Transport for London, and it only passes this site, so I understand, because Passingford Bridge roundabout is the only turning point that could be found for it. And the parish councillor, one of parish councillor's predecessors, was in constant dialogue with me and others on the public transport working group, because they feared the continued existence of Route 375, which was, it was said, going to be turned in future at Havering Atty Bower within the Greater London boundary. So I think we do have to worry about the continuation of Route 375. I also am imperfectly acquainted with this exact site, so perhaps the officer could tell me how far the bus stop is from the application site. But while he's looking that up, I'll make a couple of other points, if I may. Normally, I would be fairly red hot on questioning very special circumstances in the green belt. And that is one of the issues, of course, that the fine balance has arisen from. I personally, having listened to the ward member, think that the degree of contamination that results from this appalling ex-industrial site is perhaps a very special circumstance, but it's one of the very rare ones. I remember this site being in operation 30 or 40 years ago, and I believe it was a rendering plant because it was mentioned in connection with the outbreaks of BSE, and the sort of product which was produced in the rendering plant added to cattle feed were thought to be in the scientific basis some of the causes of the species jump of the BSE. So I don't know what the remediation conditions are. Perhaps the planning officer can advise us. But I think this is grossly contaminated land for various reasons. I don't know whether there are biological contaminants as well as heavy metals and so forth. But very, very careful attention will be required to remediating it. I doubt whether the developers will put the former use of the site in their brochures, but it is something that caveat emptor would apply to in Trumps. The question then arises about affordable housing. I entirely agree with Councillor Williamson. The value of land can be inflated. In this case, I would guess the land has a negative value because of the contamination. But with 20 houses at $500,000 each, that would be 10 million income, of which 3 million would probably apply to the land. So the remediation costs, I think, would have to be very substantial. They might well be as much as $500,000, but even so, with a development of that scale and that GDV, that shouldn't be impossible. However, I do think we should be looking at a greater degree of affordable housing than what is on offer. It might not be very much more given the circumstances, but I would have thought we should be looking at least for 1/3, perhaps 25% at the very least. Having said that, I am not going to oppose this application in the way I normally would for a Greenbelt application, partly because of the very persuasive case that Councillors Brady and Kesker have made, and because of the acknowledged costs of the putting right what was a very great wrong, which I think dated back to pre-Act times. So if Councillor Brady makes a motion to grant permission to this, I would not oppose it. But I would say if the bus stop is a long, long way from the site, the applicant should pay Transport for London for providing an additional bus stop close to the site. That would make it a little bit more sustainable than it presently is. Thank you.
Okay, I think Andrew can come back to us on that.
Yes, I've got bad news. Unfortunately, neither my phone nor my Google Maps nor my council GIS will currently let me measure the distance. But the northern bus stop is to the north of the school, which is quite a bit away, and then the other closest one is way down to the south, where sort of the residential, more dense residential development starts. Near there's a sports car place showing up there, so it's sort of right in as far as it can be from those two stops.
Sorry.
Thank you.
It wouldn't go on, it was flashing green. In their consideration of the exact form of the conditions, that's a factor that I think the officers ought to give some attention to.
I think all the bus stops are within a 5 to 10 minute walk, as far as I'm aware. I think both bus stops are within a 5 to 10 minute walk, from my own knowledge of the area. One thing, I don't think there's any proposal or motion required, because the recommendation is that we grant planning permission. So so I don't think we need to do that. Right, okay, Councillor Heap, and then back to Councillor Brady. Councillor Halfman as well.
Thank you, Chairman. Quite a few things have been brought up. I think I'm going to support this because I think it is a good use of that land, and I did go and see it, and it is an appalling mess, and it is very expensive to clean it up. Management of land I don't think is an issue, because if it's going to be rewilded, then forests survive quite happily without human intervention, so I don't think that's a problem. Also, the value of the land, to me it looks like it's been owned by the same family for a long time, so I don't think the purchase price is relevant for that. The only thing I would say is that I'm not overly fond of conditions 2 and 3 as at the top of this list. I don't see why we have to have special treatment for this. They seem to be complying with just about everything that's been asked of them at the moment. And okay, if you want to go for conditions 2 or 3, I think there needs to be some kind of time imperative put on it so that it doesn't just end up with a load of drift and a lot of pointless negotiation. That's it.
Thank you. Councillor Hoffman. Sorry, Hoffman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a few sort of observations, really. Councillor Brady did speak very passionately. So that is a material thing for me to take on board. But there are some other points we need to consider, I think, thoroughly, because we've just gone through a local plan process of intense time, effort, money, advice, meeting after meeting, and this site was not chosen. And our submitted version of the local plan has not yet even been adopted. And so I think it's a real concern if you immediately step outside the boundaries within which we are supposed to work. I don't know how we deal with that, because if we then immediately give consent for something that is not identified, it's going to surely open the floodgates for all other sites that are not identified. And I'm not a party pooper, that's just a fact. I don't know how we deal with that, and I think if Councillor Phillip were here, he would be concerned, because the local plan has not yet been adopted, and we are departing from it before it's even agreed. The next point is Councillor Brady said everyone in the village is desperately supportive of this, but there's not one letter of support here. There's 50 people have been consulted, and only one person has said something about vehicle movements. Where is that support from the village? It would have been really helpful to have had 10 people saying we're desperate for this to go ahead. No one has bothered to say anything. So how can we, as sitting here, say, well, where is this interest? Where is that pressure from the villagers who want it? So sorry because I really take on board exactly what you said, but where is that support for us? The next question is, I would really like to see what is the cost of the remedial works for this contamination. I've got no idea. What we should normally not really take into account is the mess on a site, because developers, not like in this case, but an unruly developer could trash a site and then put it before us, say how awful it is, so we give a consent. And, you know, I'm sure that's not happened here, and it's been done for horrible reasons, but we should have, to give a sound judgment, an idea of what the hell we're talking about. And I've got no idea. How much is it to remediate this site, and how does that compare with the affordable offer that's made? So I'm not here for necessarily saying deferral, but I haven't got enough information, so I'm going on a wish and a prayer and a hope, and it's the right thing to do. We should see the facts of the viability study. We can then understand that it's going to cost X to clear it up, and that's why the affordable housing is a departure from our local plan, because other schemes are going to come forward where we're insisting on 40%. We're not insisting on 40% here because of the cost of the remedial work, which we don't know what it is. So it's a bit smoke and mirrors, and I want to make sure that if we do give this consent tonight, that we're doing it in a way that somebody else couldn't challenge it, that we didn't do our job properly. Not sure where we go with that, though.
Thank you. Some very valid points. I think the support from the village really came through the support from the parish council. It's actually quite rare as a committee that we actually have a parish councillor actually speaking in favour of development. But then, of course, we also have to bear in mind, of course, that they stand to get new parish rooms and offices for their parish council. So, you know, again, we just have to be aware of all the information. But I think it is quite significant that we actually had a parish councillor speaking in favour of the development. Councillor Brady.
Well, yes, all I would like to do then is try and come back and answer some of the questions that some of the other people proposed. And I was going to say exactly what you've said, Madam Chairman, that the parish council is standing for the voice of the village. That's what the parish council is there for. I think they've got quite a large parish council. They're very active, they're very proactive, and they are speaking as the voice of the village. What you tend to get, Councillor Kaufman, you tend to get letters of objection. If everybody's happy with the situation, i.e. happy that the parish council is supporting it, then people don't bother to, they don't all write in and say, oh, I think it's a great idea. What you tend to get in planning, as I'm sure you've found, is if people are opposed to something, that's when they write in. If they're opposed to it, you'll get all the letters. You don't get letters when they all say, oh, that's fine. Just let the parish council get on with it. So the village does support them. All right, just to answer you there, I know that I can't answer you. I wasn't in on it. I don't know why various sites were selected and other sites weren't. I don't know. I wasn't in on it. I can't tell you why this site wasn't selected, except that it isn't within the nuclear setup of that village. It's a strung out, you know what Stapleford Abbots is like, I'm sure. It's a linear development, but there is part of it that's, you know, a bit bigger than the other bits up the main road. But I think this is so unusual a site with all this contaminated stuff there that I don't think it will open the floodgates, as you said, for other sites, not unless you know of all sorts of other contaminated sites like this dotted around the area, which I can't think of any. So I don't think, I'd hope that, you know, you don't have to worry about that. This is a very special case, I think. Now, getting on to more minor matters, who would manage the public space? Well, there's country care, there's the village themselves. When I go around these village council meetings, they often set a little money aside and get a grass cutter to cut the grass once or twice a year, or the hedges that stick out on the roads, they pay for that. So I wouldn't anticipate that's a problem. The bus service. Yes, it is only every 90 minutes, but believe you me, we'd love a bus service out here that was every 90 minutes. That's our regular one. I regularly drop my husband off at the Passingford Bridge roundabout if he wants to go to Romford, and he gets on that bus and sails into Romford, and then I pick him up from there again. You're saying that it's only every 90 minutes, but that's the same for the whole of Stapleford Abbots. They don't get another bus in Stapleford Abbots. There is only this one bus. And obviously, the only place it can turn around is Passingford Bridge roundabout. So this housing development would get no more and no less bus journeys than the middle of Stapleford Abbots. So from that point of view, from the sustainability point of view, it's exactly the same. It is further from the village shop than many places in Stapleford Abbots, but as I say, it's nearer a pub and the school and other facilities. Not exactly sure where the bus stop is. I envisaged that I saw one on one side of the road that was pretty close to the entrance, but I couldn't guarantee that. But I would have thought if the bus stop is somewhere in the middle of nowhere, you can ask a bus service to shift. If you've got a new development, you can move a bus stop somewhere up the road, I should think. So anyway, I don't think they're very major things. I think that is, whether it's a good place to build houses on a fat rendering site. And I think Councillor Pond referred to righting a great wrong, or so, I might have not heard you correctly because it is very difficult to hear. But I mean, originally I think this was a farm, as its name. I know it was a farm because it owned hundreds of acres around it, actually, High House Farm. So it was a proper farm with all the concrete, you know, and the outbuildings for the animals that it had. And then it grew from a farm into the fat rendering and all the other things, and it grew from there. So I think you called it a great wrong, but I think it was just grew up like that over the years. Yes, it's been in the same family as far as I can make out for 60 odd years, I believe. They've sold all the rest of the farmland off to the neighbouring farmer, and this is the second fat rendering site in Stapleford Abbots. There was another one, if people can remember it, years ago, and that made a very easy transition to a lovely housing estate, and people are very happy on it. So I see no reason why this cannot also be transformed into a housing estate. I hope I have tried to answer most of the questions there. Thank you.
Indeed, thank you very much indeed.
Chairman, may I just comment on... I do believe this was a wrong, but I don't think it was a wrong perpetrated by the owners of the land. I think it was that development of this sort of thing was allowed under agricultural privilege before the Act was more solidly applied. But anyway, it is an eyesore, and I do agree it'd be better without it.
Thank you. Councillor Rolfe and then Councillor Casca.
Sorry, I don't want to repeat all that's been said, but I do, sorry, back Councillor Brady. I did go on a site visit, and I'm not, as I say, I'm not going to repeat everything that was said. It's pointless going over. Some very good points have been made. But just on the site itself, not a lot has been said. It is diabolical. It will never be what I like to think is part of the Greenbelt. For a start, it's impossible. You go up there. I went up there, went through the gates, and managed to start driving. And I soon stopped because it's full of pits and rubbish tips and things like that. It's awful, and nobody will ever be able to use that as what most of us look upon the Greenbelt in the way it is there. And then the other point I wanted to make was him to support the bit about the bus service. It's all right, with no disrespect, but those of you who live in more urban areas and have got some reasonable bus services, but my ward hasn't got much. In fact, I think the bus that we're talking about actually does come through Abridge at times or connects up with it. An hour and a half is quite a good service, actually, in many parts of our district. And the thing is, it will... obviously, it's in the bus company's interest to increase it if they got to the stage that the business demanded it. So I don't think we can really use the fact that, well, keep quoting 90 minutes as being something that's detrimental to the case. But anyway, thank you very much. That's all I want to...
Thank you. Sorry, I wasn't saying it was necessarily, because I think it was me who emphasised the 90 minutes. No, it's absolutely fine. No, not absolutely fine. It wasn't detrimental. I didn't mean it in a detrimental way. I was merely just wanting to make sure that people were aware, because for people living in slightly more urban areas, would certainly look upon a regular bus service as a 10-minute service. So, you know, I was merely pointing out factually. It's not a problem at all. But no, I didn't mean it in a detrimental way. I was just making sure that people were fully informed. And I think also that was one of the reasons that it was discounted from the original local plan sites on grounds of the sustainability. So I just felt it was important that we were fully aware of that. So anyway, I think we've got, sorry, I did say Councillor Keska and then Councillor Hadley, Councillor Lee. All right, okay, so we've got a little, and then I'll come back over here if necessary. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. I should be very quick. I was just going to comment that it's not the only part of our area whose bus services only come around once every 90 minutes. And some of us, some areas would be pleased to have more, but we're unlikely to get them. The other point I would make is the question of precedent. I do understand this is a serious matter, but this is such a unique site. There just aren't other sites like this in the district, and I think, therefore, this is by far the best solution to the problem of what to do with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Chairman. Just going back to buses, I mean, one bus every 90 minutes, you're lucky, we get 3 a day. But I would point out that the bus service does actually stop wherever you are. You don't have to go to a bus stop.
Absolutely.
You just put your hand up and they will stop or drop you off. But in all other respects, I totally support Councillor Brady on this. It's a real dump, I have to say.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chairman. I will say that I will support this basically because I've been listening to Heather and to Paul. And I know Councillor Kaufman mentioned about the local plan, but unfortunately with the local plan, there were a lot of things that local people, when we had all these lovely workshops, were completely ignored about. And you've got to listen to the local people and your local councillors. And unfortunately, I don't think with the local plan, that has been done as well as it should be, because it seems to be a little chosen few that have made all the decisions. So I can't see any reason bringing up the fact it's not in the local plan, because my own personal opinion is that I don't have, well, I won't say anything. I don't agree with a lot on it, so I will be supporting it because listening to Heather and Paul, I think it's an ideal place.
Okay, thank you. Any other members? Councillor Pond.
Well, Chairman, just to correct your Vice Chairman on bus routes, the bus route that he mentioned connecting his ward, there is one a day, that is Route 575, and notice has been given of its withdrawal as from the 4th of September. So I don't think that's anything to write home about. But I was interested in Councillor Lee's position on the local plan. I agree with a lot of what she said. We will end up with a local plan which may well not meet local aspirations. But having said that, in the case of air quality and effect on the SAC, this site is a pretty long way from the SAC, so it doesn't worry me unduly on those grounds.
Thank you, Councillor Pond. Members, are there any other comments? Right, members, I think we have actually been able to have a really thorough discussion on all the points associated with the case. We have a recommendation in front of us that planning permission is granted, subject to the conditions and the completion of a suitable legal agreement. I'm not going to read it all out. It's there in front of you on page 13. So the recommendations are on numbers 1, 2 and 3 on page 13 of your report. So we will go straight to the vote. All those in favour of granting planning permission, please show.
(13), Chairman.
And those against?
None, Chairman.
And abstentions?
1 abstention, Chairman.
Okay, planning permission has been granted then, members. Thank you very much. Right, that means that we can move... We haven't quite finished yet, Councillor Brady, before you start celebrating. All right, if we could just finish the meeting. And item 9 is any other business. So there's just one thing that I would possibly like to bring up, which is really just for advice from the Democratic Officer, is obviously site visits have been mentioned today. I'm just wondering if there is any information about when we might be able to resume site visits, or indeed whether we should be now pursuing that.
As soon as I write the leader decision to bring them back, is the blunt answer. It's on my to-do list. I'm on leave now the rest of this week, so it probably won't get done this week, but early next week I'll draft it, because the decision originally was made by the leader under emergency powers during the first lockdown.
Indeed.
I'm sure the leader will sign it. I've had a conversation with him, so I think he will sign it. We'll get it out there, and presumably no one will call it in. So hopefully by the time of our next meeting...
It's obviously being sorted as we speak.
Hopefully by the time of our next meeting in 4 weeks' time, we will be able to go on a site visit if we so desire. Sorry, if you so desire.
Well, I think it's very useful. I know Plans East especially love a site visit, so it's... Okay, so that's... Of course not. So that was item 9, and item 10 is the exclusion of public and press, for which we have no items. So, members, I am able to close the meeting at 8:10. Thank you very much indeed. You can now celebrate, Councillor.